Have you ever wondered what dark secrets our veterans carry with them, locked away in the depths of their memories? What if I told you that a single notebook, found among the possessions of an Indigenous Marine, contained revelations so disturbing that seasoned military investigators refused to speak about them publicly? Before I continue with this chilling story that challenges everything we thought we knew about warfare, I need you to comment where you're from and subscribe to our channel. We need your support to continue sharing these hidden truths that powerful forces don't want exposed. In the autumn of 1946, just over a year after World War II officially ended, a small team of military archivists was tasked with cataloging and processing thousands of personal effects belonging to deceased or missing servicemen. The goal was simple: return what they could to grieving families and properly document items of historical significance. For most of the team, the work was emotionally taxing but straightforward. That changed on October 12th, when archivist Eleanor Winters opened a weathered footlocker belonging to Private First Class Thomas Blackfeather. Blackfeather, a 22-year-old Navajo Marine from Window Rock, Arizona, had served in the Pacific Theater and was officially listed as killed in action during the Battle of Okinawa. His remains had never been recovered, but his personal effects had been collected from his last known position. Among standard military issue items and a few personal mementos was a hand-bound leather notebook, approximately 6 inches by 4 inches, with unusual symbols embossed on its cover. The moment I touched that notebook, I felt something wrong. Winters would later write in a personal correspondence that remained sealed until 2003. It was inexplicably cold to the touch, despite sitting in the same temperature-controlled room as everything else. The leather felt alive somehow, as though it was responding to my handling. What Winters and her colleagues discovered inside that notebook would trigger one of the most classified internal investigations in Marine Corps history. One that would involve not only military intelligence, but also representatives from several federal agencies and, most unusually, specialists in indigenous languages and anthropology. The first pages appeared innocuous enough: typical battlefield observations, tactical notes, and personal reflections written in a neat, disciplined hand. Blackfeather had been recommended for the Navajo Code Talker program due to his fluency in his native language, but had instead been assigned to a regular infantry unit after displaying exceptional marksmanship during training. Kid could shoot the whiskers off a cat at 500 yards without disturbing its nap, wrote his commanding officer, Lieutenant James Hargrove, in a performance evaluation. Moves like a ghost in the field. Sometimes the men don't even notice him until he speaks up, which isn't often. As Winters continued through the notebook, she noted that Blackfeather's entries became increasingly disturbing. The handwriting changed, becoming more erratic. English gave way to Navajo, and then to something else entirely, a script that none of the archivists recognized. Interspersed with the text were detailed drawings that defied conventional explanation. The illustrations appear to depict standard Pacific Theater combat scenarios. Read the initial assessment report, but with anatomical anomalies present in both American and Japanese combatants. Subject Blackfeather seems to have developed an obsession with documenting physical deformities, possibly as a psychological response to combat trauma. This assessment would prove to be catastrophically incorrect. On October 15th, 3 days after discovering the notebook, Winters contacted her supervisor, Colonel Walter Fleming, requesting specialized linguistic support. The partial translations they had managed suggested something far beyond battlefield psychosis or artistic license. "What we're looking at here isn't a psychological break," Winters told Fleming, according to later declassified transcripts. "This is a methodical documentation of something this Marine encountered, something he believed was real, something he was trying to warn us about." Fleming initially dismissed her concerns, but agreed to bring in Dr. Robert Yellowhawk, a Lakota linguist working with military intelligence who had experience with several indigenous languages. What was supposed to be a one-day consultation turned into a 2-week lockdown of the entire archiving facility. I cannot adequately translate 30% of this text, Yellowhawk's initial report stated. The language appears to be a hybrid of Navajo, ancient Puebloan dialects, and something I cannot identify. What I can translate suggests a coherent narrative, not the ramblings of a traumatized mind. This Marine was documenting systematic observations of something he encountered on multiple islands in the Pacific Campaign. The contents of Blackfeather's notebook, according to the fragmentary reports that have since been pieced together, detailed a hidden war taking place alongside the conventional conflict with Japanese forces. A war that Blackfeather claimed only certain indigenous soldiers could perceive. "They walk among us, wearing our dead-like clothes," read one partially translated passage. "The enemy knows about them, has known for centuries. Their holy men can see what I see. Yesterday, I watched as a Japanese priest committed suicide rather than be taken by one of them. He knew. He saw what I saw. Our commanders think it was to avoid capture, but I know the truth. He feared possession more than death." As Blackfeather's deployment progressed through the island-hopping campaign, his entries became more detailed, more clinical. He recorded specific identifying features of what he called the Hollow Ones, American and Japanese soldiers who, he claimed, had been emptied of their essence and now served as vessels for something else. "They cannot handle salt water well," one entry noted. "After amphibious landings, you can identify them by the excessive drying of their skin. 3 to 4 hours after beach exposure, their faces begin to crack subtly around the eyes and mouth. By 6 hours, those cracks reach a width of approximately 2 millimeters. They know I can see this. They watch me watching them." Dr. Yellowhawk's involvement expanded to include a small team of anthropologists specializing in indigenous spiritual practices across different tribes. Their collective analysis revealed disturbing parallels between Blackfeather's descriptions and certain pre-Columbian myths found in various tribal traditions. Stories of entities that could wear human bodies, entities that could only be perceived by those with specific spiritual training or inherited abilities. "What makes this case exceptional," wrote Dr. Catherine Redhorse in a confidential assessment, "is not the spiritual framework Blackfeather is using to understand his experiences. That's consistent with his cultural background. What's exceptional is the systematic, almost scientific methodology he employs. He approaches this as both an indigenous knowledge keeper and a trained modern soldier. The combination is unprecedented in my research." By November 1946, the investigation had grown to include 17 personnel from various specialties. The notebook had been completely removed from regular archival channels and was being stored in a specially constructed container when not being studied. Several researchers reported unusual experiences while working with the material: persistent nightmares, unexplained physical symptoms, and what one scientist described as a constant sensation of being observed from within my own shadow. The most disturbing development came when investigators began tracking down members of Blackfeather's unit. Of the 38 Marines who had served directly alongside him, 23 had died during combat operations, an unusually high casualty rate even for Pacific theater engagements. Of the 15 survivors, investigators could only locate 9. 3 of those refused to speak about Blackfeather at all. 4 others provided testimony that was deemed inconsistent and unreliable by investigators. Only 2, Corporal Michael Redmond and Private Samuel Wilson, provided coherent accounts of their experiences with Blackfeather. Both men were interviewed separately, but described remarkably similar observations. "Tommy wasn't crazy," Redmond stated in his December 3rd interview. "He just saw things before the rest of us caught on. He'd warn us away from certain areas, certain people. Said they didn't smell right. We started listening after Peleliu when every spot he told us to avoid ended up being hit by artillery or ambushes. It was like he had a sixth sense, except I don't think that's what it was at all. I think he was just seeing what was really there." Wilson's testimony was even more explicit. "There was this lieutenant who joined us as a replacement after Guam. Harvard guy, perfect record, picture-perfect Marine. Blackfeather refused to be in the same foxhole with him, said he was empty inside. 3 nights later, that lieutenant led a night patrol directly into a Japanese machine gun nest. Lost 7 men. The official report called it a navigation error. But there was no error. I was on that patrol. He knew exactly where he was taking us." The investigation took an even darker turn when officials attempted to contact Blackfeather's family in Arizona. Upon reaching his reservation, they discovered that tribal elders had already conducted funeral rites for Blackfeather months before any official notification of his death had been sent. When questioned, the elders would only say that they had seen him walk the spirit path in a vision. Blackfeather's maternal grandfather, a respected medicine man named Joseph Running Water, eventually agreed to speak with investigators. The transcript of this interview remains heavily redacted, but surviving portions indicate that Running Water was unsurprised by his grandson's experiences. "Our family has carried this burden for many generations," he explained. "We can see when a person no longer carries their true spirit. In your language, you might call it possession, but that is not accurate. It is more like replacement. The body remains, but what animates it changes. My grandson was given special protection before he left for war. But such protection can only last so long against hungry things." When asked directly if he believed his grandson's accounts, Running Water reportedly laughed. "Belief has nothing to do with it. You came here because you have seen the evidence with your own eyes and still cannot accept it. That is why they have always found it so easy to walk among your people. You refuse to see what stands before you." By early 1947, the investigation had reached the highest levels of military intelligence. The decision was made to officially classify all materials related to Blackfeather's notebook under a special access program codenamed Native Sight. All personnel involved were required to sign unprecedented confidentiality agreements, and the notebook itself was transferred to a specialized facility in Nevada that officially did not exist. The story might have ended there, buried in classified archives, if not for a series of unusual events that began unfolding in the 1950s. Veterans who had served in the Pacific began reporting similar experiences across the country. Persistent nightmares, unexplained physical symptoms, and a growing certainty that something had followed them home from the war. Most were diagnosed with what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder and treated accordingly. But a small percentage of these veterans, disproportionately those with Indigenous heritage, described their experiences in terms strikingly similar to Blackfeather's accounts. Some formed private support groups, meeting in reservation community centers and urban American Legion halls, sharing stories that they dared not tell their VA psychiatrists. One such group in Minneapolis, calling themselves the Clear Eyes, kept meticulous records of their observations and experiences. Their documents, discovered after a suspicious fire, claimed the lives of 4 members in 1968, contained multiple references to Blackfeather's notebook, despite its classified status. The Navajo Marine saw clearly and wrote the first warning. One document stated, "Those who walk hollow among us know this, and have been working to erase his testimony." But we remember. We see what he saw. And we have found more of them, in positions of growing influence. The fire that destroyed much of the Clear Eyes documentation was officially ruled accidental, the result of faulty wiring in the aging building where they met. Subsequent investigation by local journalists revealed that all 4 men who died in the fire had served in Marine units that had been present at Okinawa, the same battle where Blackfeather had disappeared. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, interest in Blackfeather's notebook occasionally resurfaced among specialized researchers with sufficient security clearance. Several attempts were made to apply new linguistic and anthropological methodologies to the material, resulting in marginally improved translations and analysis. These efforts culminated in Project Longview, a comprehensive reassessment initiated in 1982 under the direction of Dr. Elizabeth Two Bears, a Cherokee psychiatrist working with the Defense Department. What we're dealing with in the Blackfeather materials isn't mass hysteria or cultural psychosis. Two Bears wrote in her preliminary assessment, the level of internal consistency, the specific verifiable details, and the cross-cultural parallels all suggest an underlying phenomenon that our current scientific frameworks are inadequate to explain. Project Longview operated for 3 years before being abruptly terminated in 1985. All personnel were reassigned, and the project's findings were sealed under national security provisions. Dr. Two Bears resigned from government service shortly thereafter and retreated to her family home in Oklahoma, where she declined all interview requests until her death in 1997. In her personal papers, released to the University of Tulsa 20 years after her death, as specified in her will, Two Bears offered only one cryptic reference to her work on the Blackfeather material. Some truths are not meant to be widely known, because the knowing itself changes what can exist in the light of that knowledge. The Marines saw clearly, but seeing clearly does not always lead to safety. Sometimes it only ensures that they know you can see them. The most recent confirmed official interaction with the Blackfeather notebook occurred in 2001, when a specialized military historical research team requested access to review the material in connection with an expanded oral history project focusing on Indigenous service members. Their request was denied, with the official response stating only that the materials in question had been removed from archival holdings due to preservation concerns. Unofficial accounts from anonymous sources within the government suggest that the notebook no longer physically exists, having been destroyed in a controlled manner at an unspecified date. Whether this destruction was motivated by genuine deterioration of the physical material or by more troubling concerns remains unknown. What is known is that in the years since World War II, thousands of veterans have reported experiences that align with Blackfeather's descriptions. Most have been dismissed, medicated, or otherwise marginalized. But among certain communities, particularly on reservations across the country, the story of the Indigenous Marine who could see what others couldn't has taken on near-mythic status. We still perform the protective ceremonies before our children leave for military service, explained Raymond Talchief, an elder from Oklahoma interviewed in 2015 for a documentary that was never completed. We know what they might encounter over there and what might follow them back. The young Marine wrote it all down, and though they tried to hide his words, the truth found its way home. In 2017, a breakthrough of sorts occurred when historian Melissa Whitefeather, claiming to be a distant relative of Thomas Blackfeather, filed a Freedom of Information Act request for any records related to his service. After 18 months of administrative battles, she received a response that officially acknowledged the existence of Special Access Program Native Site for the first time in an unclassified document. The response, while denying her request for specific materials, included a single heavily redacted page from what appeared to be an analysis of Blackfeather's writings. Though most of the text was obscured, one chilling passage remained visible. Subject consistently describes entities that can redacted human hosts through a process involving redacted contact. According to subject's observations, these entities cannot be detected by conventional means, but are recognizable to individuals with specific redacted abilities, predominantly found among indigenous populations. Subject's documentation suggests redacted infiltration among both Allied and Axis forces, potentially continuing into redacted society. Whitefeather's subsequent attempts to access additional information were met with increasingly firm denials. In 2019, she reported being approached by individuals claiming to represent national security interests who strongly suggested she discontinue her research. Shortly thereafter, her academic position was eliminated due to budget cuts, and her research materials were destroyed in what police described as a targeted burglary at her home. Today, the full contents of Thomas Blackfeather's war notebook remain one of the most closely guarded secrets from the World War II era. Veterans Affairs hospitals across the country continue to treat aging Pacific Theater veterans for nightmares and paranoid delusions that many therapists privately acknowledge share disturbing similarities. And in reservation communities from Arizona to Alaska, medicine people continue to perform protective ceremonies for young men and women before they deploy overseas, ceremonies specifically designed to help them recognize, avoid, and, if necessary, defend against what one elder describes simply as the empty ones who hunger for fullness. As rumors of Blackfeather's notebook continued to circulate among select communities, unusual patterns began to emerge. Veterans who asked too many questions about the Indigenous Marine or his writings reported strange experiences, unexplained surveillance, sudden career obstacles, and in some cases, what they described as visitations from individuals who seemed human at first glance, but left the veterans with an inexplicable sense of dread. They know exactly what to say, how to stand, even how to breathe to pass as normal, reported former Sergeant Daniel Lightfoot in a hand-recorded testimony provided to his tribal council in 1973. But their eyes never track quite right. They focus on your throat instead of your face, and they smell wrong, like ozone and copper. Just like Tommy described in his book. While the official native site program remained deeply classified, unofficial investigations continued through networks of Indigenous veterans and traditional knowledge keepers. Their efforts, conducted largely through oral histories and personal correspondence, revealed that Blackfeather's experience was not unique, merely the most thoroughly documented case. In 1993, a remarkable discovery was made when the family of Lieutenant James Hargrove, Blackfeather's commanding officer, donated his personal papers to the University of Texas archives. Among routine military correspondence and family letters was a sealed envelope marked "To be destroyed upon my death, J. Hargrove." The university archivist, following standard procedures, opened the envelope to assess its contents for historical value. Inside was a 12-page handwritten letter addressed to Hargrove's son, dated June 12, 1972, 1 week before Hargrove died of an apparent heart attack. The letter was immediately flagged by automated security systems scanning for specific keywords associated with classified programs. Within 24 hours, federal agents had confiscated the original document. However, the archivist, Dr. Maria Gonzalez, had already scanned the letter into the university's digital system as part of standard processing procedures. While the digital copy was also officially confiscated, Gonzalez had printed a personal copy out of professional curiosity. This copy eventually found its way to journalist Carson Reynolds, who published excerpts in his 2005 book, Shadows of the Pacific: Untold Stories of World War II. I failed your Navajo brother, and that failure has haunted every day of my life since, Hargrove wrote to his son, who had no connection to Black Feather that investigators could establish. He came to me 3 times with his concerns, his observations. 3 times I dismissed him. Even when my own eyes began to see discrepancies, I couldn't explain. By the time I realized he was right, it was too late. They knew he was documenting everything. They knew he could recognize them. What happened on Okinawa wasn't an enemy artillery strike like the official report states. I watched them take him. Hargrove's letter went on to describe how, during the chaos of the Okinawa campaign, he had observed several officers from another unit approach Blackfeather's position. They moved wrong, mechanically, but too fluid at the same time. Tommy saw them coming and started running, but there was nowhere to go in that hellscape. They cornered him in a bombed-out shrine. I heard him screaming in Navajo, not in fear, but what sounded like ancient prayers. There was a flash of light I still can't explain, and when I reached the shrine, it was empty. No bodies, no blood, just Tommy's notebook lying open on the stone floor, with that final entry that still fills my nightmares. According to Reynolds's book, the final entry in Blackfeather's notebook, which Hargrove claimed to have read before turning the material over to intelligence officers, contained a hastily scrawled message. If you are reading this, they have found me. They cannot take what I know if I send it to the ancestors first. Remember, they cannot cross running water without help. They cannot tolerate pure salt. Their vessels crack under prolonged exposure to sunlight. Learn these signs. They have been here longer than we know, but they are coming in greater numbers now. Look for them in positions of authority. Look for them among those who never sleep. The old ceremonies still work. The old ways remember them from before. I go now to the protection of the ancestors. Keep your spirit whole. Reynolds's book was met with immediate legal challenges. The Department of Defense issued cease and desist orders, claiming the material contained classified information harmful to national security. After a protracted legal battle, Reynolds agreed to remove specific passages from future editions. Shortly afterward, he was killed in what police determined was a random mugging, though he sustained unusual burn patterns on his neck and torso that the medical examiner found inconsistent with any conventional assault weapon. The digital trail of Blackfeather's story continued to resurface despite official efforts at containment. In 2010, a series of declassified Operation Paperclip documents included peripheral references to a comprehensive non-human intelligence assessment conducted jointly by American and seized German intelligence assets in the immediate post-war period. One document specifically referenced Indigenous detection methodologies and recommended the immediate acquisition and containment of all materials related to Case TB 1944, widely believed by researchers to be a reference to Thomas Blackfeather. These documents suggested an even more disturbing possibility, that both Allied and Axis powers had been aware of the phenomenon Blackfeather documented, and that post-war intelligence operations may have been concerned with more than just conventional military technologies and scientific knowledge. The Germans had been studying this since the mid-30s, claimed Dr. Erich Steiner, a former military intelligence analyst, in an anonymous interview published on a specialized history forum in 2012. They had their own indigenous contactees, Sami people from northern Scandinavia, with perceptual abilities similar to what Blackfeather demonstrated. The difference was that certain factions within the German High Command were actively trying to collaborate with these entities, not expose them. Operation Paperclip wasn't just about rockets and medical research. We brought over specialists in areas that still don't officially exist. In 2013, the story took yet another turn when Joshua Blackhawk, a Navajo graduate student at Arizona State University, began researching Indigenous service members' experiences for his doctoral dissertation. Focusing specifically on spiritual and paranormal accounts, Blackhawk created an anonymous submission portal where veterans could share experiences they might be reluctant to discuss in official settings. The response was overwhelming. Within 6 months, Blackhawk had collected over 300 accounts from Native American, First Nations, Native Hawaiian, and Alaska Native veterans describing encounters with what many independently referred to as hollow people, or empty ones. While the specific terminology varied across tribal backgrounds, the core descriptions remained consistent. Individuals who appeared human but whose behavior, sensory attributes, and effect on the observer aligned remarkably with Blackfeather's documented observations. Most disturbingly, these accounts spanned every American military conflict from World War II through Afghanistan and Iraq. Indigenous veterans from each war described nearly identical entities, using traditional frameworks from their respective cultures to understand what they were seeing. "My grandfather saw them in Vietnam," wrote one anonymous Lakota veteran. "My father saw them in Desert Storm. And then I saw them in Fallujah. Same hollow ones, moving through time like it's nothing, wearing new uniforms but carrying the same emptiness. They're drawn to conflict. They feed on it somehow." Blackhawk's research caught the attention of military authorities before it could be published. His university funding was abruptly canceled, and his academic advisor strongly encouraged him to pursue a different dissertation topic, citing concerns about scholarly rigor and institutional reputation. When Blackhawk refused, a series of academic misconduct allegations emerged, eventually resulting in his dismissal from the program. Undeterred, Blackhawk returned to his reservation and began working with tribal elders to collect and preserve traditional knowledge regarding the entities described in his research. This work continued quietly until 2016, when Blackhawk was approached by a group identifying themselves as spiritual descendants of Thomas Blackfeather. This group, comprised primarily of Indigenous veterans from various tribes, claimed to be continuing Blackfeather's work through a multi-generational effort to document, understand, and defend against what they called the Long Invasion. According to their oral history, elements of Blackfeather's notebook had been memorized and transmitted through trusted networks of Indigenous service members since the 1940s, preserved through memory-keeping techniques traditionally used to maintain sacred knowledge. The notebook itself may be locked away or destroyed, but its contents live in the minds of those who need to know, explained David Running Horse, a former Army Ranger and group member, in a private correspondence with Blackhawk that was later shared with select researchers. "Each of us carries a piece of the knowledge. No single individual holds all of it, for their protection and ours. But when we come together in ceremony, the complete understanding emerges." The group claimed that Blackfeather's observations had been systematically verified and expanded upon through 7 decades of continued surveillance and documentation. They had identified specific patterns of infiltration, preference for certain professional fields, and, most alarmingly, what appeared to be a coordinated long-term agenda. They seek positions at critical junctures, places where human suffering can be amplified or mitigated, where decisions affecting thousands of lives are made. Running Horse wrote, "Military command structures, emergency response organizations, psychiatric facilities, religious leadership, political offices. They insert themselves at the pressure points of human society. According to the group's analysis, the entities had become increasingly sophisticated in their mimicry of human behavior over time, making detection progressively more difficult. They had also apparently developed countermeasures against traditional indigenous methods of identification, suggesting some capacity for adaptive learning. In Blackfeather's time, certain traditional songs could force them to reveal themselves, Running Horse explained. Those songs no longer work reliably. Neither do some of the plant medicines our grandfathers used to clear their perception. They've evolved, or perhaps the vessels they're using have been conditioned to resist our methods. Despite these challenges, the group maintained that individuals with the inherited or cultivated ability to see clearly could still identify the entities through subtle cues, micro-expressions that didn't align with emotional states, unnatural patterns of blinking and respiration, specific types of dermal reaction to sunlight and salt, and what many described as a shadow that moves independently from its caster. The most significant development in the Blackfeather saga came in 2019, when a specialized FOIA request by environmental researchers inadvertently resulted in the release of documents from a seemingly unrelated program. These documents, focused on psychological warfare applications in the Vietnam War, contained multiple references to indigenous sensory capabilities and non-conventional threat identification methodologies derived from Case TB-44 protocols. One partially redacted memo, dated August 1967, outlined the deployment of specially selected indigenous servicemen as perceptual scouts in advance of conventional operations in contested territories. These individuals, drawn primarily from Navajo, Apache, Lakota, and Cherokee personnel, were assigned to standard units but given secondary covert directives to identify and report any hollow signatures among either American or Viet Cong forces. Assets continue to report consistent identification patterns despite operating in geographically separated areas with no cross-communication, the memo stated. Target density appears to increase significantly preceding high-casualty engagements, suggesting some form of precognition or advance intelligence regarding planned operations on both sides. A follow-up document, dated October 1968, recommended immediate termination of the program following an incident where 3 perceptual scouts allegedly attempted to neutralize a high-ranking American officer they had unanimously identified as compromised. The officer survived, and the indigenous servicemen were quietly court-martialed for attempted murder and sentenced to lengthy terms in military prison. All 3 died under mysterious circumstances within 18 months of their incarceration. Official reports cited causes ranging from suicide to prison violence, but all 3 bodies were cremated before family members could view them, despite religious objections. The memo concluded that while the TB-44-derived protocols show persistent accuracy in controlled settings, the unpredictable behavioral responses in deployed assets represent an unacceptable operational risk. What made these documents particularly significant was the revelation that the military had not only been aware of Blackfeather's claims, but had actively developed and tested protocols based on his observations for decades after the original notebook had been officially classified and suppressed. As the digital age progressed, efforts to maintain secrecy around Blackfeather's story became increasingly difficult. Online communities of researchers, indigenous knowledge keepers, and conspiracy theorists began connecting previously isolated data points, gradually assembling a more complete picture of both the historical record and ongoing developments. In 2021, an anonymous whistleblower using the pseudonym Navajo CT posted what they claimed were scanned pages from Blackfeather's original notebook to a specialized dark web forum focused on classified military history. The images showed hand-drawn diagrams of human anatomy with unusual annotations, detailed descriptions of behavioral anomalies, and text in multiple languages including English, Navajo, and an unidentified script. Digital forensic analysts who examined the images found no evidence of manipulation, and linguistic experts confirmed that the Navajo passages contained dialect elements and ceremonial terminology specific to the Window Rock region in the 1940s. Most compelling was the handwriting, which matched known samples of Blackfeather's writing from his military enlistment forms and training evaluations. The posted material also included what appeared to be Blackfeather's field observations regarding the entity's capabilities and limitations. These notes, written in a terse, clinical style, detailed specific environmental factors that seemed to impair or reveal the hollow ones. Full noon sun causes micro-fissures around the eyes, visible only with sustained observation from within 10 yards. Exposure to salt water creates similar effect but more pronounced and rapid. Fissures appear within 20 to 30 minutes and persist for up to 6 hours after exposure ends. Running water presents navigational barrier. They will not cross natural streams without using human bridge or vessel. Ceremonial use of white sage, cedar, and specific mineral compounds, detailed in grandfather's teachings, not to be written here, creates visible agitation, increased blinking rate, and, in 3 observed cases, immediate withdrawal from area. The most disturbing element of the leaked materials was Blackfeather's documentation of what he called transition events, incidents where he claimed to have witnessed the process by which a normal human became a host for one of these entities. His clinical description suggested a process that was neither immediate nor entirely physical, instead involving a gradual replacement of the original personality while maintaining the outward appearance and memories of the host. Subject Matthews exhibited first signs following night patrol on May 6th. One entry read, "Initial indicators: cessation of all non-essential communication, abandonment of previous habits, smoking, card playing, subtle withdrawal from social bonds." By May 9th, subject demonstrated artificial speech patterns, appropriate words, but delivered with imperceptible delay, as if translating from another language. May 12th. Subject now mimics previous personality traits only when directly engaged by commanding officers or close associates. When believing himself unobserved, all facial expressions cease. May 15th. Transition appears complete. Subject now actively identifying other potential hosts through prolonged eye contact. Original Matthews effectively gone. Within 48 hours of their posting, the images were removed, and the account that had shared them was deleted. Users who had downloaded or interacted with the material reported unusual technical issues with their devices, and several described what they believed to be physical surveillance of their homes and workplaces in the days following exposure to the images. One user, an Indigenous veteran claiming to be part of the Blackfeather lineage, posted a final warning before his account also disappeared. They've maintained the containment for 80 years because they have assets within every system that could expose them. But they know their time is running short. Too many of us can see now. Too many have connected. When you find yourself suddenly questioning your own memory of these events, when you wake up believing this was all fiction, that is their most effective defense at work. Trust what you saw. Trust what you felt. The hollow ones are real. They walk among us, and they know we're watching. Since that time, direct references to Blackfeather's notebook have become increasingly scarce on conventional platforms. Search algorithms seemingly deprioritize related content, and social media discussions on the topic frequently report unexplained content removals. However, interest has persisted in protected spaces, particularly among Indigenous communities, where the story resonates with pre-existing traditional knowledge. In 2023, a collaborative project between 12 tribal historic preservation offices began quietly collecting oral histories from Indigenous veterans across generations, focusing specifically on non-conventional observations during wartime service. While this project makes no direct reference to black feather or hollow ones, its methodologies and interview protocols suggest an organized effort to document experiences that align with his original observations. Project Director Dr. Lisa Standing Bear, when asked about the initiative's purpose in a rare public statement, offered only this: "Every conflict has its official history, and then it has the truth that those who fought carry in their hearts and minds." For Indigenous warriors, that truth often includes dimensions of experience that Western frameworks dismiss or pathologize. We are creating a space where those experiences can be honored and preserved in their fullness, without judgment or distortion. The most recent development in this ongoing saga occurred just last year, when a specialized division of the Defense Department's Historical Research Branch issued a highly unusual call for cultural consultants with expertise in Indigenous perception frameworks and anomalous cognition. The position requirements included fluency in at least one Indigenous language, traditional ceremonial training, and military service in a combat zone, a strikingly specific combination that many observers connected to the continuing influence of Blackfeather's legacy. Today, as we approach the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, Thomas Blackfeather's War Notebook remains one of the most tantalizing and disturbing artifacts from that global conflict. Whether viewed as an extraordinary case of trauma-induced perception, a genuine documentation of phenomena beyond conventional understanding, or something else entirely, its impact continues to reverberate through military, academic, and Indigenous communities. For those who believe Blackfeather's accounts, the implications are profound and unsettling. If his observations were accurate, they suggest a hidden dimension to human conflict, one in which wars serve not just political and economic interests, but also create environments that benefit entities that may have been moving among us for centuries or longer. My grandfather told me that the hollow ones have always been here, shared Michael Blackfox, a Cherokee veteran of the Afghanistan conflict, in a recent oral history recording preserved by his Tribal Cultural Center. They were here before Europeans arrived. They were here when our oldest stories were still new. They do not create our conflicts, but they nourish themselves on the suffering our wars produce. And they have grown stronger, more numerous, and more sophisticated as our capacity for destruction has increased. Blackfox, like many Indigenous veterans who have shared similar experiences, reported identifying numerous compromised individuals during his deployments. Fellow soldiers, local civilians, and even high-ranking officers who displayed the subtle markers first catalogued by Blackfeather decades earlier. There was this one colonel who never sweated, even in full battle rattle in the Afghan summer, Blackfox recalled. His uniform would be bone dry when everyone else was soaked through. His blinking pattern was wrong, too regular, like a metronome, and he always positioned himself where the fighting would be heaviest, before anyone knew where contact would occur. After I started watching him, I noticed others like him, scattered throughout different units, different branches, even among the local forces. They weren't working together in any way I could see, but they were always where the death toll would climb highest. Like many before him, Blackfox reported experiencing professional and personal difficulties after attempting to document his observations through official channels. His security clearance was revoked for mental health concerns, and he was eventually given a general discharge under honorable conditions, effectively ending his military career while limiting his access to certain veteran benefits. I knew the risks when I started recording what I was seeing, Blackfox explained. Every Indigenous service member knows the story of Blackfeather, whether through official channels or through our own networks. We know what happened to him and to others who've tried to expose the truth. But we keep watching, we keep documenting, because someone has to stand guard. While the full truth about Thomas Blackfeather's war notebook may never be publicly known, its legacy persists in the shadows of official history. From specialized military programs to grassroots indigenous knowledge networks, the ripple effects of what one Navajo Marine documented in the Pacific Theater continue to influence how some view the hidden dimensions of human conflict. For those with eyes to see, the signs remain visible. For those with traditional knowledge, the ancient protections still hold power. And for those who carry on Blackfeather's work across generations, the vigilance continues, watching for the subtle indicators of emptiness wearing human form, for the hollow ones who walk among us, wearing the faces of the living while harboring something entirely other. As one Lakota elder put it in a teaching session recorded for future generations, the young Marine who could see clearly paid with his life to bring this knowledge forward. We honor his sacrifice by remembering, by watching, and by protecting our full humanity. In a world where emptiness masquerades as strength, maintaining the fullness of our spirits is not just resistance, it is survival. The search for Blackfeather's original notebook continues among specialized researchers and indigenous knowledge keepers. Whether it still exists in some classified repository or was destroyed decades ago remains unknown. What endures is the story itself, passing from generation to generation, a warning and a call to vigilance that transcends official silence and institutional forgetting. If you find yourself unsettled by this account, perhaps questioning its veracity or your own reaction to it, the discomfort itself might be worth examining. For as Thomas Blackfeather supposedly wrote in the final pages of his war notebook, doubt is their first and last defense. They have cultivated it in human minds for generations. Learn to recognize when your doubts are truly yours, and when they have been placed there, to turn your eyes away from what stands before you. In these uncertain times, as conflicts continue to erupt across our troubled world, the lessons of Blackfeather's notebook offer a different perspective on the nature of war itself, not just as a human tragedy, but possibly as something else's opportunity. And perhaps the most valuable teaching from this Indigenous Marine's experience is the importance of maintaining our full humanity, our complete spirits, even in circumstances designed to empty us of everything that makes us who we are. For those who see clearly, for those who feel the weight of this knowledge, remember that you are not alone. The Watchers have always been among us, standing guard at the boundaries of what we think we know. And though the hollow ones may walk in daylight, wearing familiar faces, they can never truly hide from those with the ancestral gift of clear sight. As conflicts and chaos continue to unfold around our world, perhaps it is time to look more carefully at those who benefit most from human suffering, to question whether all that drives our collective violence is truly human in origin. And for those who find resonance in this story, who feel a recognition they cannot explain, consider this. Some gifts of perception skip generations, lying dormant until needed. The ability to see clearly what others cannot perceive may be awakening in more of us as the hollow ones grow bolder. In the end, the most powerful protection might be the simplest: authentic human connection, unshakable compassion, and a spirit anchored in something greater than ourselves. For as Indigenous traditions have long understood, it is not weapons or technology that ultimately preserve us, but the sacred bonds between genuine souls recognizing each other's light in a world where darkness sometimes wears a human face. Many of the veterans who have shared their stories similar to Blackfeather's have found that turning to God and accepting Jesus Christ as their Savior has provided protection against the hollow ones. The power of faith and prayer has been repeatedly cited as a shield that the entities cannot penetrate or overcome. When I call on the name of Jesus, they cannot maintain their disguise, one veteran testified. The power of Christ reveals what they try to hide, and they cannot stand against it. This spiritual dimension to the phenomenon suggests that beyond the physical indicators Blackfeather documented, there exists a profound spiritual component to identifying and resisting these entities. Many Indigenous Christians have found that their traditional spiritual practices, when combined with Christian faith, create a powerful protection against the Hollow Ones. As we conclude this account of Thomas Blackfeather's extraordinary war notebook and its enduring legacy, we are left with questions that transcend conventional understanding. Questions that may never find complete answers in our lifetime, but which nevertheless demand our attention. For if there is even a fragment of truth to what this indigenous Marine documented in the blood-soaked islands of the Pacific, then the wars we thought we understood may have always been serving purposes beyond our comprehension, and the enemies we thought we faced may have never been our true adversaries at all.